Hi guys, my name is Donnie and welcome back to my workshop. This week I've decided rather than working on the Jaguar or the Messerschmitt, I'm gonna rather focus my attention on this old Land Rover that's been standing at my shop. This car was actually a barn find, so it was standing in a shed somewhere on a farm for many years, and all we want to do with this old Land Rover is to get it running. But now I'm gonna open the bonnet, and I haven't done that yet, so I don't know what it looks like, but I can tell you that I smell a rat. There's something stinking in there, and my little doggo is also very interested to know what's going on inside the bonnet. So come with me and let's have a look. Wat ruik je, hè? Oh my soul, people. Look at. Yep, my doggo was smelling correctly. There was definitely or is a rat living here. Ugh. That's just this. What? Ew. I have found the culprit. Oh, that's disgusting. Hey, Jappie. Wat trek je, hè? Is nogal fun. Alright guys, as expected, it is a bit nasty looking. So the first thing that I'm gonna do before I start working on anything on this engine is I'm going to pressure wash it and see if I can clean it up as best I can. And then I'll start looking at the engine, see if I can get it started. Let's do that. Okay guys, so now that I've got the engine cleaned up a little bit, I'm gonna see if I can get it to turn over. I'm not expecting it to start, so I'm just gonna put a fresh battery in here, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove the airbox so I can get access, and then I'm gonna take out the spark plugs for a couple of reasons. One is so that the engine can turn over a bit more easily, and secondly to just inspect the spark plugs and also to replace them and make sure that they do spark when the engine is turning over. So let's do that quickly. Okay guys, so the engine turns nicely, which is awesome. It didn't struggle at all, and I think now that I've turned it over a couple of times, it did build up some oil pressure, so everything should be oiled up nicely. There is oil, I did check, and I'm going to replace it, but it's good enough for my initial starting it. There isn't any spark as I had expected, so I'm going to see if I can troubleshoot the spark issue before I do the fueling system. Now how this works, for you guys who don't know, is there's a coil that produces a high voltage spark, and that energy goes into the distributor, and the distributor distributes that spark to all the cylinders, and this coil is powered by a 12-volt supply, and it is switched by, on the inside of this distributor there is a switch that is called the points, and the points open and closes according to the timing that then produces the spark that then goes to the spark plugs. So to troubleshoot this issue, I'm going to first make sure that there is 12 volts going to the coil, and then I'm going to make sure that the rotor inside this distributor is sending the spark to the different spark plugs through these spark plug wires. And then I'm going to make sure, which is probably the culprit, is that the switch that switches this coil on and off on the inside, that is called the points, does make and break contact, because that is something that happens. Is sometimes it welds itself shut or it sticks open, and that then makes it not being able to switch the spark on and off, if I can put it in layman's terms, of this coil. So let's do that. I'm going to measure the voltage, and then I'm going to check that issues out. Maybe we can get spark on the plugs, and if we can get that done, then we can go over to the fueling system. Let's do it. Okay guys, so I did determine that this positive wire was eaten through by the rats, so I fixed that, and I got 12 volt at the coil. And how I tested that was by just shorting out this other wire that goes from the coil to ground, and that produces a very small little spark on the spark plug. And I've now determined that this switch, or the points, and the condenser is basically the discharger, is probably not working, because when I turn it around it does make and break contact, but it doesn't produce a spark. So I think that the condenser needs replacing. So I'm going to be replacing both of these, and also I'm going to replace the spark plug wires, because they have been eaten through by the rats. So let me just go to the shops quickly and get those things, come back, and I'm going to put it in and see what happens. Just for a matter of interest for you guys, if you ever work on a distributor, if you've determined that there is voltage to the coil and the problem lies with the distributor, if you're turning it over and you get no spark at all, it is most probably the points that is seized up that is causing it not to spark at all. And if you get a spark but it is very faint, it is probably the condenser that is failed. That is basically the discharger. So that'll cause a very faint spark, so that would be the culprit over there. But when you're working on a distributor, or when you are servicing a distributor, you buy these things together and they cost next to nothing. So replace all of it and you'll be sure that your problem is sorted. Let's do it. Nice. Okay guys, so now that I have determined that I do have spark again on my distributor, I'm still waiting for these bogey cords. I'm going to continue with the other part of the triangle to get an engine to run, and that is the fuel. Now the thing is, with an old car like this, there are I think 4 things that could cause fuel not to reach the cylinders. Number 1 is the fuel tank that might be corroded or bad. Number 2 could be the fuel lines that are also cracked and sucking in air. And number 3 could be the fuel pump, the mechanical fuel pump in this car. This is where it is. So it could be the diaphragms in that fuel pump that has become brittle and cracked, or it could be the one-way valves in that fuel pump that needs cleaning or replacing. And then the 4th thing could be the carburetor. And usually what happens with a carburetor that's been standing for a long time is that the float gets stuck. The fuel crystallizes inside, the float gets stuck, and the fuel aren't able to come in there, or it overfuels and it doesn't close as it should. And in the carburetor also, the other thing could be the jets that are clogged up. So that also needs to be fixed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the fuel tank and see if the fuel tank is in good condition, and then I'm gonna go through the other things that I just talked about now. So let's do that. Right guys, so I've just tried to drain the fuel tank. It is right here underneath the driver's side, and it was full of emptiness, as one would expect from an old car. But I think that might be a good thing, because that would mean that there isn't any fuel in the system that could have crystallized over time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just leaving this bucket here at the bottom, and I'm going to put some fuel in the tank and see if it runs through, and see what kind of color it is, if it is clean or if the fuel tank is corroded very badly. So let's have a look at that. Nice guys, this is good news. The fuel went straight through and it drained out of the fuel tank, and it is nice and clean. So that means there's probably not any corrosion in the fuel tank. So I'm going to close up that bottom screw and put some fuel on the system, and then I'm going to go to the front and see if the lines are okay and if the fuel pump is pumping fuel as it should. Okay guys, so now that I've closed up the fuel tank and put some fuel in the tank, I'm going to focus on the fuel pump. And I've got a feeling that we might get lucky, because it seems as if this engine got cleaned up before it got stored away, and that there might be no fuel in the system. But in this little glass filter, I see some old fuel lying there at the bottom, just a very little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that glass, if you can see there, and just clean up that one nicely, and then I can manually pump with this manual pump and see if the diaphragm and the one-way valves work properly. And then I'm going to check if the fuel will go through that fuel filter and start accumulating inside the fuel, the carburetor. Before I open that one up unnecessarily, I just want to see if fuel gets there. So let's do that quickly. Guys, I'm telling you, the more I look at it, the more optimistic I get. That glass filter was rather clean. There was just a little bit of gunk in there, so I'm going to pump this one now and see if it draws in fuel into that glass filter. I don't know if you can see there, and if it does, I'll see if it goes through that plastic filter into the carburetor. Let's do that quickly. Start pumping it. There we go. I can see fuel coming in. Can you guys see it? Yeah, absolutely. And it's pumping nice and strongly. That is absolutely amazing. It's what we need. And I'm actually getting fuel in this filter. Nice. Okay guys, so if I depress this accelerator cable now with the fuel in the system, I should see a squirt of fuel here inside the carburetor, and that would mean that fuel is getting inside and the float is working and everything. So let me just depress that one quickly. Alright, there we go. Nice guys, look at that. The fuel is getting in properly, it's atomizing nicely, so it means that the jet is probably in a good condition. And I think guys that we're gonna get lucky. I think if I just put those new bogey cords on here, I'm gonna get this engine started. So let's give it a go before I open this carburetor unnecessarily. Okay guys, so whilst I'm waiting for those spark plug wires, I had a look at the braking system and clutch system. The brakes, when I press down on it, seems to brake too well actually, because it looks as if the wheels might be stuck. But I'm gonna check as soon as I get the engine started if the car moves forward or backwards. But there was enough brake fluid in the system, and it is nice and clean-ish still. So as soon as I get the engine running, I can see if there's any leaks in the braking system. But as far as the clutch go, which is an hydraulic clutch, there was no clutch. The clutch wasn't clutching at all. So what I did was I opened up this cap, and it was empty and dirty inside. So I put some brake fluid in there, and I opened this outlet up and just stuck my finger there, and when I press down on the clutch pedal, there should be pressure coming out here, and nothing came out. There's no pressure happening. So I think that in this master cylinder there might be a seal that is broken or it is corroded or something like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take off this clutch master cylinder and open it up and see what I can see on the inside, and if I need to get some spares for that also. So guys, this was really honestly the first crank that I gave, and it started up straight away, no problems whatsoever. So this engine is in a beautiful condition. The clutch is working now, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give it a service by replacing the oil and the oil filter and the air filter. I've already replaced the spark plugs, but I think this thing is ready for a new life. Then I'm gonna just make sure that it's got overall everything is fine, brake lights and everything is working. But I think this car is ready to get out of here. So guys, thanks for watching, I appreciate it. And next week I'm gonna move all of those things into my new part of my workshop, and I'm looking forward to that. And then I can start working on the big stuff like the Messerschmitt and the Jaguar. But thanks guys, see you next time. Cheers.